Good morning and welcome to your Farm and Home Show. My name is Joanna Coles, and this morning we're visiting with Kristin Hildabrand, Warren County Extension Agent for Horticulture. Good morning, Kristin.
Good morning, Joanna.
Now, Kristin, today we're going to continue our conversation about growing onions in the state of Kentucky, because I think a lot of people might miss this opportunity.
Yeah, and especially when you're looking at varieties too, is that, some of the varieties that have more sulfur content, like ones that actually gets planted in the ground that have more sulfur, it can be more pungent, and then also it makes you cry and stuff when you cut into it. So there's things that you can do to kind of, as it's growing, to kind of prevent. Usually sulfur is not one that we consider for here in Kentucky, but there's other care and things that you can do here in the state of Kentucky that can help you be more successful with it. One of the things I want to mention about an insect pest that's can be detrimental, especially in the wet spring weather that we have here in Kentucky, is a root maggot or onion maggot. It's kind of the same thing, but basically they're in the ground about that time, and again, it's favored for wet spring-like weather that we do have in Kentucky. So whenever you're putting out those, either the small transplants, which are like seedlings, or the actual little bulbs, you can actually put out a little bit of malathion, and it's mainly just at the very, very base of the plant, Joanna. So you apply it according to those recommendations, and that will help serve as a preventative measure, especially if we're favored to have a spring, wet weather. But if you have raised beds, those typically will drain off faster, so you might not necessarily have to do that.
And Kristin, I think maybe some people that have maybe attempted onions before have run into some insect issues, or maybe planting them too deep, because when we think about potatoes or something, we plant those a little deeper, but onions really don't need to be set that deep.
No, they don't. 1 to 2 inches deep in the row. If you've got multiple rows, you want to space those out about 12 to 18 inches apart. And generally, after they get up and going, you want to thin them out so that way you get a nicer onion to it, nicer size. So really pay attention to some of that, especially when you look at planting. And different varieties, they may have certain specifications that you just need to look to on the label. But one of the other things, especially when you're setting these type of onions out in the field, is looking about weeds. They do not do very well against a lot of weed pressure. So it's really important to make sure that you take care of those when they're small, as far as the weeds. And of course, we're dealing with a lot of spring annual type weeds at that time. So just kind of be mindful of that. And generally, later on, you can put maybe some mulch out, and that'll also help with not having to apply a lot of herbicides or anything like that. But just kind of get the seed bed ready ahead of time, make it weed free as much as possible, and then again, be ready and try to keep that at bay during the actual growing season. The other important component with onions is water. So generally in the spring, when we set these out in the field, they're going to be generally a little bit more water. But as we get further into May and June, then it can kind of really taper off. So if you see that there's not at least an inch of rainfall, then you're going to go ahead and supplement that. You can use a drip irrigation system if you've got that expense where you can use that for, or if you need to go ahead and just hand water. But do make sure, because as that onion is developing, it's going to need extra water, and if it's not there, you need to make sure that you got it. The one thing I wanted to mention about harvesting is generally you want to try to cut off your water supply about 10 days before you get ready to harvest. Usually the tops are going to be kind of drooping over or kind of getting a little top heavy. Usually at least 75% of that will start to show. So that's kind of an indicator on when to harvest. You do need to kind of pull them out of the field and put them out of the weather. Sometimes some people like to harvest them and just leave them out in the field, but they get sunburned that way. So if you can kind of bring them inside, like to a garage or something that's got covered, or even a back porch, and still let the warmth of that area help with the harvest conditions. That'll help it last a lot longer, especially when you talk about bringing it inside. So there is a curing process that the onions need to go through. But again, if anybody has any questions about growing onions in Kentucky, this home vegetable gardening guidebook that we have is really A++ on walking you through everything you need to know, from harvest even to curing and storage.
All right, Kristin, we'll certainly appreciate the information. And if you have questions, make sure to contact your local extension office. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.